This will be the deciding factor as two of the NHL's best teams in the Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning will be facing off in the Battle of Florida in the first round of this year's Stanley Cup playoffs. And we're going to break down one thing in particular that will win one of these teams the series and possibly the Stanley Cup. We're going to break it all down in this episode of Hattrick HQ. But before we do that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 72% of you who watch these videos are not actually subscribed to the channel. So if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening around the NHL as we head into what is going to be one of the craziest playoffs we've ever seen in this league's history, be sure to hit that subscribe button. But Casey, let's jump right into it. A highly anticipated series, and they're running it back from last year. I feel like a lot of people forget that these two teams played in last year's first round as well, but it is the Tampa Bay Lightning versus the Florida Panthers. And there's a lot to get to, but right off the rip, Casey, how you feel about this series? And I think this is going to be one of the more exciting ones.
There's a lot of great series happening in this year's playoff, and this is at the top of my list, at least one of them at the top of my list, because the Battle of Florida every year in the playoffs, whenever we do get it, is always a fun one to watch. And like you said, last year, Florida beat them in 5 games. So I think Tampa's going to have a little bit of an edge here to try to get back and beat this team and put them out of the playoffs, because they got a lot of momentum from winning that series last year, which led to the Florida Panthers winning the Stanley Cup last year. So I think if Tampa, they're going to be hungry. Kucherov, all these guys who were there last year. Vasilevsky. It's the first playoffs without Stammer as a Bolt, so that's going to be a little bit of a weird one to see, I think, for a lot of NHL fans. But I'm excited for this series. I think it's going to be a very hard-fought, close series. And even though Florida did beat Tampa in 5 games last year, Darius, these games were very close, and a lot of them were won on empty netters. And I think this is how this series is going to be. It's going to be a physical one. There's going to be a lot of fists flying, especially from Matthew Tkachuk, and I think this is going to be a great series to watch, and I'm excited for this one to start up as soon as possible.
Yeah, Matthew Tkachuk is coming back. We'll get to that in a second. But in terms of the Tampa Bay Lightning, like you alluded to, yes, they lost the series last year in 5 games. Florida Panthers coming out of it almost unscathed and then stomping their way down to obviously through the Boston Bruins and down to the Stanley Cup Finals and winning the Stanley Cup. But a lot of these games, like you alluded to, were very close. Tight scores, especially the first 2 games. This series could have went either way, and that was last year. And the Tampa Bay Lightning have completely retooled coming into this season. If we take a look at their lineup, they're actually running 11-7 right now, which is pretty interesting for the Tampa Bay Lightning. But again, completely retooled. They got McDonough back there on the blue line. Cernak's always been a really good piece for them. They have a couple of young players that have come up and made a name for themselves. They went out and traded for Yanni Gourde at the trade deadline, a guy that they've won the Stanley Cup with before. Obviously, they re-signed Gensel in the offseason. This is a different team, I think, than last year. And yes, you've lost Stamkos, but this is still a team that, they won 8 games in a row just recently. They're finishing second in the Atlantic Division, which nobody thought they were even going to make the playoffs at one point this season. So I feel like they've been very impressive, and I think that they could actually surprise in this series. And again, if you look at some of what they got going on in terms of injuries, Oliver Bjorkstrand is injured as well. And if you look at the head-to-head numbers this year, we'll get to stats in a second. The season series this year is tied 2-2, but if you do notice, Tampa Bay, when they've won the games, they've been blowouts, 4-0 and 5-1. So I think that's pretty interesting. And there's one factor that I think is going to tip everything over the edge, KC, and that is goaltending. But how do you think, how do you feel about the season series this year? Do you think the regular season has anything to do with the playoffs at all? And do you think goaltending could be a deciding factor? We'll dive into the stats in a second.
I think it does have a factor, because if you're sweeping guys in a regular season, it's like, okay, like these guys got our number and now we got to go in and beat them 4 times here to advance to the next round. But I think in the way of the Battle of Florida goes, I mean, the regular season doesn't really matter, I don't think, because these teams are always going to be fighting hard whenever they're matching up, because they're fighting for their home state of Florida. So I think that it does kind of have a little bit of a factor, but not that much. I think, like you said, Tampa has a very different team this year. It's going to be a different feeling. They've blown them out in the regular season when they've won those games. So I think Florida's going to have that in the back of their mind as well. But they got a lot of guys here like Brandon Hagel, a guy who nobody expected to make this Four Nations roster at the middle of the season. He's having a great year for them. And obviously, like you said, Gensel is a big X factor. Getting him last year and now having him on his full deal, ready to go, and has had a great season for this team. And I mean, Nikita Kucherov, I mean, the guy speaks for himself. I mean, his point total is ridiculous. And their offense is going to be really good, but I think it's going to be a very tough matchup, especially against a Florida Panthers team that is very physical. I mean, you got guys there like Matthew Tkachuk, you got Sam Bennett. Now you have Brad Marchand. Adding him at the deadline is definitely a different X factor thrown into this series. So it is going to be two completely different looking teams with a little bit of a retool on both ends, and it's going to lead to a great series, I think.
Absolutely, and I do think that the winning DNA, that thing that, all these athletes talk about, that is going to play a factor in this series, because I don't think the Florida Panthers are the same team from last year, but they've been able to go out and find a couple players that have filled those holes very well. They still have a lot of guys from the Stanley Cup championship team. You add Brad Marchand, who's going to be absolutely going to be an X factor in this year's playoffs. And obviously Seth Jones, a big body back there on the blue line, who hasn't really ever played playoff hockey, a couple times with the Columbus Blue Jackets, but he really gets an opportunity to sink his teeth into it with this Florida Panthers team. And I kind of want to get into goaltending now, because we know, how much of an X factor Marchand's going to be. We also have to mention that, obviously, Gadjevich is also injured. He might play a factor in this series. Aaron Ekblad is going to be returning in Game 3 of this series, so if Tampa can kind of do something with home ice advantage before he even returns, that could be a factor as well. Matthew Tkachuk will be returning by all accounts as well, so keep that in mind. He wasn't in the original lineup. But I do want to jump into the goaltending, Casey, because I think this is going to be the deciding factor in this series, because I feel like a lot of the lineup in both of these teams that they're going to be icing in this series will almost cancel each other out, because they have so many good players and physical heavy players. So when you take a look at the goaltending this season, I mean, Vasilevsky, we know what he can do. He's a two-time Stanley Cup champion, of course, right? Played 63 games this year. Didn't actually notice that. He played a lot of hockey this year, but he's sporting for the season a .921 save percentage, which is very impressive. And then if you look at Bob, he's played a lot of games this season as well. 54 games played. He has 33 wins. He has 5 shutouts on the season. He does have a .906 though, so above league average. But if you're looking at both goaltenders, I mean, Vasilevsky, very impressive numbers: 38 wins, 6 shutouts, and a .921. Casey, how do you feel about the goaltending? Is there one that you would pick over the other? And do you think this is going to be a deciding factor in this series?
I mean, you make a great point. I think this is definitely the key to this series, because we know how good Tampa's offense is going to be. We know how good Florida's offense is going to be. It's going to come down to the matter of, can we find the back of the net with these two goaltenders in the crease? Because Vasilevsky has been proven in the playoffs to be an absolute stud. He just catches fire, and he's saving stuff that you wouldn't even think is possible. We've seen this from him over the years as a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I think we've seen flashes of that last year with Bobrovsky. I mean, he got really hot last year and was a big factor of them winning the Stanley Cup at the end of the season. So I think that it is going to be a big player here, because we're not going to see many 6-5 games or 5-4 games. These are going to be 3-1 with an empty netter type games, or 3-2 type games. We are not going to see many goals scored on these goaltenders, because they are going to be locked in, dialed in for these playoffs, and whichever one can catch fire and be the guy and keep their team in it, make those game-saving saves, make those series-winning saves, is going to be the team that comes out on top. And I think just looking at those initial numbers, I mean, numbers are just stats at the end of the day, and we know what both these guys can do in the playoffs. So it is going to be interesting to see, but I mean, it's going to be hard to bet against Vasilevsky, a guy who's been noted to do it year after year.
Absolutely. And, you show me a good goaltender, I'll show you a good team. And both of these teams are really good teams and have great goaltenders. Now, of course, the question that everybody's asking, who is going to win this series? So we can dive into that now. And Casey, I'll throw it over to you again for your prediction first. Who do you think is going to win this series, and in how many games?
It's going to be a tight series. I can definitely see this one going 7. I think it needs to go 7. I think with Tampa Bay getting put out last year in 5 games, they're going to be wanting this, and Florida's going to be wanting to try to go back to back. So I think this is going to be a long, hard fought series. But at the end of the day, I do think that the Tampa Bay Lightning are going to get their revenge this year, and we're going to see a lot of the offense that the Tampa Bay Lightning does have just start flowing, and they're going to be able to find the back of the net. The main reason I think Tampa is going to win is because I think Florida has lost a lot of their offensive type defensemen. A lot of guys who were like Brandon Montour. That's the guy I'm kind of want to highlight here. I think he was a big key factor for them winning that series and then eventually winning the Stanley Cup next year. But I do think they did have a good retool. But I can definitely see Tampa getting the win here.
Absolutely. I think that it could go either way this year, but in terms of my prediction, I think first and foremost, if Florida is able to win game 1 of this series, Tampa Bay is absolutely cooked. I honestly believe that because Aaron Ekblad's coming back in game 3. You have Matthew Tkachuk coming back. That crowd is going to be on fire in game 3. So Tampa's got to at least win game 1 and split the series or win both games to start the series. But I will say it's going to be the Florida Panthers in 6 games. I think that there's going to be a lot of theatrics in this series. I think Tampa's going to keep it close, but I think Florida, the physicality that they bring to the table is just different, and they have that championship DNA. They've added Brad Marchand, and I know Tampa Bay has a lot of that as well, but they've, the roster, there's so much turnover with that roster as well. And I just have to think that the Florida Panthers are going to do it again. But we'll see. I do trust in Bob to, put in another really good performance. But he has those years where sometimes you'll have a great year and then the next year is not so great. So we will see what happens. But it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be one of the best series, I think, and one of the most highly skilled and fastest series that we're going to see in the playoffs this year. But maybe the lowest scoring, which is very weird, but just different styles clash, that's for sure. But we want to hear what you have to say in the comments about this series. Who do you think is going to win, how many games, and why? And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything going on around the league.